Hey everyone, it's Jerry at the Fledge. Welcome to another episode of Every Damn Day. And today, my man Omar is coming on the show because I needed someone to save a slot that the guy wasn't responding to me. So, got a new guest than what was scheduled, but I am very excited about talking to you, Omar. How you doing today?
I'm fantastic, Jerry. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, man. It's been like 4 days. You still got your Christmas tree up.
Man, I think this might be one of the best price Christmas trees we got at $60, but it's an investment. It's gonna be up until those pine needles start falling, man.
It's gorgeous. You should keep it
Thank you.
up till COVID's over or something like that.
That's
See how it
interesting.
lasts.
Interesting. I would have loved to have planted some type of seed or plant at the beginning of the pandemic and then see how big it can get before, our world might come back to some semblance of normality. I might have a full grown ass pine tree if I did
Yeah.
that.
That'd be pretty sweet. So,
Yeah.
you and I have known each other for a few years now.
Yeah.
And you had tons of projects going on when I met you, and you've got tons of projects going on now. Why don't you tell us about Omar and Tiger and some of your projects?
Sure. So my name's Omar Saqib Karim. I was born in New York State of the United States of America to two Bangladeshi immigrant parents who came to this nation for economic opportunity, a specific academic opportunity. I believe it's something like over 90% of PhD candidates in the United States are actually foreign born. So I'm lucky enough to be a part of that culture. Raised in Southern California, moved to Michigan a few years back, and I have my hands in a lot of different arenas, but it always ties back to politics. So currently I'm employed as a supplemental instructor at Lansing Community College, but with the pandemic, work's essentially non-existent. So there's a lot of time to spend on other projects and my own work. I am re-enlisting with the United States Army pretty soon. So that's a big project right now. What else? And now we have a new president. So there's a lot of political work to be done on the ground as well, because the entire landscape is going to change yet again.
Yeah. So we can't give up turf to this guy just because he's a Democrat, and
No.
in a lot of ways, just because he's not Trump, right?
Oh yeah, that's a fantastic point. If you talk to most voters who voted for him, they would say they didn't vote for Donald Trump, or excuse me, they didn't vote for Joe Biden. They voted against Donald Trump. So It's not as if we even elected a new president. It was more like we were voting to kick another one out.
Yeah. What do you see happening? And I'm going to bounce around a little bit, and we didn't talk about this, but what do you see happening like in the Lansing mayoral race? Is it a potential that we do that as well?
That's a very interesting point. Most real world politics that's going to effectuate things in your life, and in your neighbor's life, your family's life, your community's life, is going to be municipal, countywide, and statewide. Most of the things that happen on a global level outside the markets, it's not really going to affect you. But who is running the community you live in is the place where you can be hurt the most or help the most. So as far as Democrats are concerned, our current sitting mayor is a Democrat. His possible challenges are also Democrats. But I will say that the current mayor is very much a party line tower, meaning that he is a shill essentially for the Democratic Party, insofar as all of his talking points, all the things that matter to him as an individual, as a mayor, are talking points underneath the Democratic platform. And living in Lansing, Michigan being a purple state, and the surrounding areas around Lansing and Ingham County are all red. So considering that our populace is very diverse, I don't think it's appropriate to have an individual currently in office that only represents, one political party or spectrum. Rather, I would like to see a candidate who represents all people, and not just the ideology of their political party. So with that being said, I have seen Andy make a lot of choices, Mayor Shore make a lot of choices that weren't pro-people, but rather pro-Democratic Party platform.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that as I look at the landscape and who's popping up and who's saying stuff right now, it in a lot of ways it looks like I'm just voting against Andy, and I hear that a lot.
Sure.
I hear that a lot right now. So it's going to be a fun year, I think, in Lansing politics to see how this shakes out.
And Lansing's such an interesting city too, because our community as a city is so political. I remember speaking to a Ukrainian artist out of MSU who now lives in Lansing, and she was saying that while in Ukraine and Russia and in Eastern Europe and Europe in general, she'd never seen so much fervor and passion about politics, especially candidates, right? Where she moves to Lansing, and half of the front yards have political signs in them. They might be for a candidate, a party, a movement, a group. It could be conservative, it could be progressive. But Lansing's so interesting in that way that we really care. If you're conservative in Lansing, you got an opinion. If you're a liberal in Lansing, you got an opinion. If you're a Republican, a Democrat, Libertarian, you are an opinionated Michigander, and that makes me very proud to live in my city and my state because people care. I might not agree with them. They might not agree with me, but I'm glad to know people really care.
They're out there doing something.
They're doing
trying
something
to take action.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
I love Lansing for that as well. So, like I said, I'm going to bounce around a little bit.
Yeah, let's go.
What you got on you? What you wearing? Ace? I can't quite read it.
This is Astartes.
Astartes. Okay.
It sounds Latin, but it's actually based off a fictional doctor's name. But the term really stands for a fictional group of individuals called Space Marines. Now, Space Marines I like because they're the Jedis of this particular Warhammer 40K universe. They are maybe not Jedi, maybe they're more Sith. I digress. They put humanity first. They put the needs of the human Imperium first, and they use violence and aggression and what some might call toxic masculinity and others might call the tip of the spear or the blunt of the shield to protect the interests of planet Earth. And so the way people love Star Wars and Star Trek, which I love those two, I also fucks with Warhammer 40K. So that's what this represents. Now, on this level 3 plate carrier I have here with a couple of magazines, because I also train very heavily with firearms. I'm a part of NAGA, or National African American Gun Association, our local chapter called Malcolm Little. Actually, you, Jerry, have some interaction with my group. We actually raised a couple $100 this past holiday season to give to families in need. And you, Jerry, helped us connect with those individuals. So thank you very much for that, Jerry. And I know that those families are very appreciative of what both of our organizations did together.
I was honored to be associated with that. But again, it was your group that raised the money. I just helped make a couple connections. And I'm proud to know that you're part of that group because that group, everything I've seen so far is pretty awesome. Did you catch my... Oh, go ahead.
What was that?
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, so our group is called Malcolm Little. So it's a local chapter of NAGA, National African American Gun Association. Malcolm Little after Malcolm X, who was born down south, I believe, but his family moved up here to Michigan and Lansing, Michigan specifically. His father was a preacher. And at the time, their last name was Little. His father was actually killed here in Lansing by white supremacists. His body was strung across a railroad, and the coroner said that it was suicide, even though I don't know how you could tie yourself to a railroad. His family had 2 insurance policies. The smaller policy paid out on the death, and the larger one didn't. So Lansing, Michigan is a big starting place for Malcolm X. And to honor him and his work that he did, he's one of my personal role models. So I'm very happy to be in the city of his youth. That's why we call ourselves Malcolm Little, because we represent not only the black man and woman, but the person of color in the United States who has been treated unfairly, doesn't want to complain about it, but rather would do something about it, right? And so we find in the firearms community, it's mostly white because this country is mostly white, but this country has a rich history of Native Americans, First Nations, black individuals, Hispanic, Latino, and even Asian individuals in this country as long as white folks. but have not experienced the same kind of freedom. But yet we still all have the same citizenship on our passport, same flag. And what NAGA seeks to do is give that power back to people of color in this nation who love their country. We love our country, but because we love it, we want to get the most out of it. And so this is a way for us to exercise our rights, hopefully not have to, but be able to defend ourselves and create a very strong community for Black Americans and people of color, as well as our white brothers and sisters.
Yeah. I had Michael Lynn on the show on Saturday talking about firearm training and education.
Yeah, Michael Lynn's great. He runs Advocates, and they do a lot of work. He's a good trainer. We have a lot of trainers in the community. But he's definitely a proponent, especially over social media. He puts in the groundwork. We need people like that who are loud and proud. Honestly, I'm loud and proud. You know me, Jerry. I might be the loudest room in every room I've ever been in. But people like him are sorely needed in this community.
Yeah, I really like the part about just getting people legal. They're legal except for a piece of paper or maybe a course or whatever.
Yeah.
And as soon as they get that felony for not having that piece of paper, it's basically a technical violation that is going to affect the rest of your life.
It's very interesting. Yeah, because if you look at like the Constitution, most, if not all the amendments on the Constitution don't really have a huge bureaucracy. We don't have a huge bureaucracy of preventing people from expressing themselves, right? Freedom of speech and freedom of religion is our First Amendment and meant to be inalienable. And so we don't have this huge pushback in our country, but because of some perceived first world privileged perceptions of firearms and violence and in general war and conflict, they think that it's so bad that no one should have access to it when people of color in this nation have been oppressed with violence. Even when they got some freedom, they were still oppressed with violence and never allowed to really protect themselves without the threat of even more violence. And now we seek to take that power back.
Yeah. And I think it's, it is our right. It is, I don't like school shootings. I don't like, big massacres.
No one does.
I know that sounded really weird. And, so there's these types of things with gun control where like other nations are looking at us like we're just out of our minds for not doing something about it. But we are littered with guns, and we are littered with legal guns and illegal guns and all kinds of things.
Sure.
Let's get everybody on the same playing field, no matter where that field happens to lie on that continuum of gun control is what I think, so I really support what Michael's doing. I support what NAGA is doing, and obviously what you are doing. So, all right, we'll get off from that for a second, because one of the big topics we wanted to talk about was political reform.
Yes.
And in particular, I think we want to kind of have an angle on workers' rights and these billionaires and this bullshit that's happening with the inequities in America that we need to do something about. And it's probably going to take governmental intervention to do that.
It's definitely going to take governmental intervention. I think one thing that should always be thought of with politics, and I don't think it needs to be mentioned for you or I, Jerry, but definitely for our larger audience, and especially if we're talking about political reform, is with freedom of speech and with a democracy, it's about consuming all the information, viewpoints, and opinions, and coming to, in our collective opinion, what's the best choice to make, right? Compromise, a market of ideas, so to speak, right? And if you look at how the pandemic's been treated so far, the people who should have known it was coming, the government officials, but especially CEOs and producers of goods, they should have, if not, saw this from a mile away. So all the things that we're suffering under now could have been handled better and addressed sooner. So, I mean, let's look at the inequities, for example. If you look at the restaurant industry, right? We don't have specific numbers in front of us, but obviously the entire industry has been completely devastated. Now, I just read an article talking about how Uber Food, Grubhub, some other food transportation services, delivery services have absolutely boomed in business for third-party delivery service, a secretive third-party delivery service, because now a lot of if your restaurant doesn't have a relationship with them, they'll still place an order with you and have someone pick it up. So these places are doing great, and you have business, and they use restaurants to make their money, but restaurants are faltering. So I don't think we're addressing the inequity that's occurring, right? And so the same thing with mom and pop shops that were already being devastated by Myers and Walmart and Kroger's. Now with so little foot traffic, even those places are going down, but Amazon's jumping up. I'm sure. What's the one Chinese equivalent? I forget. Alibaba will be jumping up. I know there's a Brazilian equivalent. These places already had such huge monopolies, are only growing more. And so my major concern is with the rights of workers and with the rights of individuals who are not working, the proletariat, working class as a total. If our government, if the heads of companies couldn't see this coming, take proper precautions to prevent from spread, but also take care of their employees, because how many people who were formerly employed are now unemployed, couldn't take care of it. And then that goes into the hands of the government. And if the government can't make sure that people are taken care of, aren't getting kicked out of their housing, have food to eat, food insecurity is at an all-time high. Housing insecurity is at an all-time high. And then it's left in the laps of individuals who do not have the tools. I am definitely one for picking yourself up by the bootstraps, but it takes strength to do that, and it takes some privilege to do that too. So now we're left with a kind of complete mess. And so we have to look at how can we reorganize the system to benefit the majority of humanity. I think it's something like 1% of the population owns about 50% of the stocks in the stock market. So the stock market's not a good indicator of how the economy as a whole is doing, and how the workers who fuel all those stocks, the value behind them, how they're suffering.
Most of our economic indicators favor the rich and are an indicator of how well the rich are doing.
Exactly.
I mean, that's a fact.
Exactly.
And, I think that we're nearing half of the Black-owned restaurants that are out there will not reopen after COVID. So it's getting worse and worse. Exactly. And then you also look at, let's take an Amazon or a Walmart or somebody like that, who has just tons of employees in warehouses and in trucks and in retail outlets, not Amazon, but
huge infrastructure.
And you look at the billions of dollars he's made, I think now $79 billion since the pandemic, Jeff Bezos in particular. Yes. And if you work at a place like that, or you work at a Walmart and they pay you minimum wage, which in Michigan is $9.65 per hour, that's not a living wage.
No, it's not.
So you have to find food. You have to find a way to pay your bills. You're forced, basically, if you worked 2,000 hours at that wage, you are not getting above the poverty line. So our minimum wage is below the poverty line. Yes. And these companies that are making billions are paying that minimum wage, and the government and the nonprofits and communities like the Fledge, we supplement that for them.
Yes, exactly. And I'd like to point out that right before the pandemic, we were seeing a global economic boom. We were doing very well financially. This is something that I think more progressive and liberal individuals don't really like to acknowledge. And I'm not saying Donald Trump had anything to do with it, but through the Donald Trump presidency, the economy is doing fantastic. But also at the same time, he's bungled this pandemic, which has been the largest boon to the economy since our last recession or even the Great Depression. So we were doing great globally and nationally right before March. But the big problem is that workers' wages barely moved. And so you get hit by a pandemic. Most businesses have, whatever their burn rate is, they could probably cover that with a lot of excess cash they have because they've been profitable. But all of their workers, I believe it's about 70% of the United States population, is a paycheck to paycheck household. And if they didn't have enough money to save before, now they have zero income stream. They can't afford anything. Within the next 2 months, if we don't renew this federal moratorium on evictions, how many people, how many children, how many elderly, how many American people are going to be kicked out of their homes because the Democratic and the Republican Party can't get their butts out of their heads out of their butts, because they used to work together in this country, but we don't do that anymore. And so now it's who's the majority and who can push their own ideology forward, and the American people suffers, right?
So what reforms would you like to see?
Oh man, a really big one that I'm not really super behind, but it's one of the only solutions I've seen is a UBI, is a universal basic income. If you look at what it means to be a human, our family experience, our personal experience, what we want for our lives, how we want to see our lives, and very little of it has to do with, if you look at the core of it, very little of it has to do with making money, right? It's more about experience. It's more about producing. Like, we've turned producers into money makers. When producers always were going to paint, they were always going to, work out. They were always going to meditate. They were always going to want to provide people with food and all these things. We've monetized it, and we've made that monetary system the only means of living, right? So Andrew Yang, who I was not a fan of Andrew Yang, I think he has cool ideas. I'm a Bernie guy myself. His introduction of the idea of the UBI, because he is a very intelligent individual who pointed out, with automation, the great majority of jobs, even in a giant like China, will plummet. So you're going to have robots take over all these menial labor jobs, right? Collar stuff. And you're going to have huge portions of your population, if not the majority of your population, out of work. So are we going to just let poverty, dominate our species, or are we going to actually provide our people with a means to live and have a decent life? So I think a UBI is definitely an interesting idea, and honestly one of the few answers to such a difficult question, which is we will no longer truly have the work to let most human beings work, because you can't have 100% employment. It's impossible. But you also don't want negative, like zero employment. It's also impossible.
So I want to stay on this subject a little bit before we go to the next reform. And I'm going to work backwards a little bit. We're talking about like automation.
Yes.
And you brought up China. China just put an investigation on Alibaba for monopolistic practices.
Very
which
interesting.
I think is good that they're doing that. We ought to probably have a talk with Mr. Bezos ourselves, but we're all scared of him, right? He's going to leave the country and whatever. Fuck that. He won't. But I'm reading this book, and I keep mentioning it in my show because I love this book. It's called Utopia for Realists. And it hits a little bit on what you were saying, like the economy. And I don't give Trump credit for it. I give the workers of the world credit for it.
Yeah.
The economy was booming, and you go back in time a little bit. You go back to Henry Ford days, and everybody was working 7 hours a week or 7 days a week, and just tremendous amount of hours. And Henry Ford introduced the 5-day work week and was like criticized for it up and down. And it became standard just a few years later. Yeah. But one of the things that he said was, if my workers don't have time to go enjoy themselves, to drive around the countryside, they're never going to buy one of my cars. So, I thought he was pretty insightful. He's got a bunch of other hangups, and I'm not, saying Henry Ford's my hero, but I thought that was insightful to make that happen. And then, I don't know if you know, but Nixon almost got UBI national in the 70s, but was eventually the Democrats were asking for more. Exactly what just happened, in my opinion, with the $2,000 check. It created a distraction, created a political turmoil, and therefore they couldn't come to agreements. But also people were saying that, people are going to get lazy. People are going to, do drugs more. People are going to not want to work. And that turned out, trial after trial after trial, to not be true. People might have quit their shitty job, but they went and got their GED, and then they went on to community college, and then they built a business. And that, to me, is fundamental in moving forward. And it comes in many forms, as you know. there's universal basic income, but even universal college education, universal health care. These things would also be awesome things to get done.
I truly agree.
So anyways, I just want to kind of comment on that.
Yeah.
What are some other reforms you got on your mind?
Oh, man. So I am not a fan of a two-party system. I am Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I fight for democracy and I fight for the republic. There's no other ideology, no liberal, progressive, authoritarian, fascist, communist, socialist. I believe in democracy. And under a two-party system, democracy does not exist, especially with a two-party system that includes lobbying and with such heavy corporate interests. I like to say the American people don't have lobbyists, children don't have lobbyists, the homeless don't have lobbyists. But who does your personal congressman spend most of their time with? Lobbyists for big oil, big energy, big pharma, big food, big tech, big military. And then with a two-party system, the powers that be have tapped into a very primal instinct for humans, which is myself and the other, right? And you can even say that some of the culture I have with violence and firearms is also an aspect of that, because what is violence and fighting if not having yourself an oppositional force? The problem with having that within your political system is that if it's not diversified, you're given a black and white choice, right? A and B. And when you give humans an A and B, and they can identify with A and they can demonize the B, they will become hyper obsessed with that difference and that conflict. So with a Democratic and Republican-led government, I mean, we have the Green Party and the Libertarian Party, but when you have only two superpowers of a political party in a nation, such issues like the economy, abortion, drug legalization, the military-industrial complex, the prison-industrial complex, these all have such minutia to them and so many gray areas that you really have to consider so many things. But when you only say there's one answer for this or one answer for that, then there's no compromise, and democracy is defined by compromise. So I look at other great democracies around the world, and they have half a dozen parties that have a great influence over their country, right? If you look at the German parliamentary, they have like 36 different political parties, all with members in Congress, in their parliament. And because that's, again, how democracy works. So a reform I would make would be to remove power from the two main parties of our system. And I don't know how to implement that. I don't know how to start a new thing. I just know that the conversation needs to be had that Democrats do not represent the United States of America, nor do Republicans. They represent Democrats and they represent Republicans. Whereas everyone in the United States who wakes up in the morning and thinks about what money they can make and what their kids are doing and how much food they need to eat and what's for dinner tonight, they're not Democrats or Republicans. They might be on a piece of paper, but they're humans. And we need to put human needs first before ideological ones. So I would really do away with such brash, dichometric political parties.
And they make it scary to even want to vote for a third party because, if we ended up with Trump again, oh my God. But I also think, we're kind of celebrating Biden, but fuck Biden too.
For no reason. We're selling Biden for no reason. Biden, the author of the 88, 89, 92, and 94, as well as other crime bills, played a huge hand in locking up nonviolent offenders, mostly people of color in this nation. Biden was also pro-war. Biden wasn't always pro-LGBTQ and A plus.
I want to comment right there. I want to interject. He was actually anti in a lot of ways. And exactly. I just want to give some love out to someone. I'm not going to say his name, but sure. You got my love, neighbor.
Yeah. So the point is that Biden was never a champion of the people. And so, again, we didn't vote for Biden. We voted Trump out. And it's almost even more dangerous, right? Because it's kind of the evil you know is better than the evil you don't know. So in this case, it's like, oh, well, the Democratic Party will handle things better than Republicans. And admittedly, they will to some degree. However, they will not commit to any systemic change because they benefit from the same government system that benefited Donald Trump, right? Under President Obama, the biggest reform that was done was healthcare, but nothing else got done. And under Trump, the only thing he was able to do was pass tax cuts for the rich, but then nothing else was going to get done because both of those presidents had opposite party senates and the Congress controlled, so nothing ever moved forward. Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah. So what's something you do every damn day to push your mission forward? And if you don't think we understand your mission, you can rephrase that as well. I mean, if we haven't quite heard it.
My mission as a general statement is freedom and education and purpose for the working class of our planet. My mission is to make sure all humans experience, have the privilege, are given the right by those more powerful than them, such as us Americans, to allow them to have all of their human rights, all their civil rights, the ability to express themselves freely, the ability to have whatever religion they want, and the ability to live a good life, right? I don't think people want to be happy. People want to have a purpose. And I'd like to provide that with people. So I'll do it by any means necessary. And in my own personal life, I study violence in order to get some things done, especially on a global level, considering crime and war. What do I do every day to push that mission statement forward? I work out every day. I make sure that I sweat. I make sure that I bleed. I make sure that I hurt. Your physical health is the first and foremost thing you can do for your personal success. Not money, not religion, not relationships, not sleep. Well, sleep is a part of physical health. Nothing but physical health. If your physical health's not on point, you will not achieve what you want to achieve. You will not save that family member who is doing poorly. You will not save the business down the street who's not bringing enough revenue. You'll take longer to achieve your dreams and goals. You need to take care of your body. You need to take care of your meat suit, because we're all a bunch of ghosts in this spiritual universe piloting a bunch of meat suits. And your meat suit will determine a lot of your ability to accomplish things. So for me, again, with someone who studies violence, if I'm not capable, I can't save someone. Like, a lot of people like to think that kind of macho men have these weird dreams, these grandiose ideas of running into a burning building to save a kid, and how lame is that? I don't think it's lame to want to protect other people, to serve your nation, your community, protect your children from crime, to protect your nation from fascism or authoritarianism, or your planet from an economic system that would subjugate all of your fellow human beings. I think it's a beautiful, wonderful thing to fight for the freedom of Homo sapiens everywhere on this planet and all the other planets in the universe once we get there.
So I want to.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. I want to make one comment.
Yeah.
You are a sweet person. I mean, you are a nice guy. You are the party in the room. You are the loud guy. You're the dancer. You are, a nice person, a sweet guy. Sure. I mean, for lack of, all of that. So sure. Every time you say you study violence, I just want to make sure that people out there aren't thinking Omar does drive-bys every Thursday night or some stupid.
Yeah, it's
preparing. Clarify that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point to make, Jerry. The way I think about it, I think about nature and reality. If you think about physics, especially astrophysics, and the nature of our reality and how volatile it is, going from the original theory of the Big Bang all the way up to how sun, stars, and planets and planetesimals are formed, and how nebulas contract and expand. Our very nature, fabric of our reality, is violent and chaotic. And that also shows itself within biological nature on our planet. At this moment, there are cheetahs stalking prey. There are wolves ripping up holes in the ground trying to get to a mole. There's hawks are diving on a bunny right now, right? Two male hippos are fighting. So that also applies to humans and human culture and human civilization. There will always be an element, be it human, non-human, or natural, that will commit to harming us. And it's up to humans to stop being a victim, because most of our existence as humans, we're fighters. Humans fought, from cavemen to you, Jerry, as a wrestler, to me as a public servant. To the single mother who's fighting at work right now to make a paycheck to feed her kid. Humans fight, and we're tough, and we can handle things. And so one thing I find in first world nations is we become so privileged. We think that chaos can be tamed. We think that there's no more variables. If we live in a peaceful community, we think crime doesn't exist. There is a percentage of rape that occurs in Lansing. There's a percentage of murder. There's a percentage of theft. The point I'm getting to is that chaos will always persist. And chaotic forces that are natural or conscious will always target peace to make chaotic. And if we as individuals, conscious, loving humans, don't also prepare for that, chaos will be railroaded. As you know, there's extremist groups in this nation, white nationalists, individuals who are so tied to religious groups. We know globally there's Islamic extremists, there's other religious extremists, there's individuals who might not even have a religion that just want to see humanity suffer. For example, the Chinese essentially doing the largest ethnic roundup of a people since World War II with the Uyghur Muslims in northwestern China. There are forces that will harm humans. And if good humans don't stand up, good men and women don't stand up between the forces of evil and the innocents who would be harmed by it, then nothing would exist. So I like to give my fellow brothers and sisters and people who just don't give a fuck the option to defend themselves, and also I will be their sheepdog to defend them.
So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew what a lovely person you are. You really are. And I'll say one thing very quickly. I love people so much, I will fight and die so that they can live and prosper. And now some people might not understand that. They might think, oh, we all must be peaceful. I'm not God, you're not God. Those wonderful idealists are not God. There's always an X factor. So we have to prepare and make sure that the people we love and the things we love are taken care of. And I love so much that I will commit violence. That's it. That's the point. Right. Everyone should. So one more subject on this. Yeah. Defund the police.
Yeah.
What's your thought?
Super interesting. The idea is good. The phrasing is horrible, because the idea, as anybody who's educated will tell you, is that it's not really about getting rid of police. It's about diverting funds away from a militarized police force into more social programs that would be beneficial for our communities, such as drug advocacy, social work, and de-escalation. Now that's a good point. I think the police are way too over-militarized. We've experienced, not with the pandemic, but just as 21st century planet Earth in the United States, we are at an all-time low of crime globally. Globally, there's the least amount of war, bloodshed, and crime there's ever been in human history. So why then are the police so militarized? Why did the Pentagon give so many police stations former military equipment, weapons, and gear? It's pointless. And I would say the only reason to do that is to have control over our citizenry. Now, I did caveat that it's a terrible phrase, because you automatically put yourself like this. Like I said, we have the us and the opposition. It automatically creates an opposition, because I'm not anti-police. I'm pro-cop. I've been arrested multiple times. I've been racially profiled multiple times. I've gone to jail. Even with those terrible experiences, I still understand the necessity for law and law enforcement. However, the way it's been done is hyper-violent, hyper-masculine. It's police viewing the public as an enemy rather than an entity to be served. So I am 100% for police reformation. However, the term defund the police, although, again, great point, great ideas, but just the way it's stated, you create such opposition. People who are pro-police, Blue Lives Matter people, they would agree with police reformation. They would agree that we also need to make sure cops are the most trained they are. Cops, I train more than police officers. Members of my group train more. I can handle, I will guarantee you I can shoot better than most cops because of how much time I put into training. And police do not have that level of mandatory training. They don't have quality training. Most police don't even have hand-to-hand. Jerry, you are a state champion wrestler. You would be able to beat the majority of cops in hand-to-hand combat because they don't even have basic grappling skills. Most cops don't. Watch a police video and see how many cops are actually wrestling or BJJ students. Some are, most are not. So those people would agree with police reformation. Let's make cops better. But when you say defund the police, in their mind, they're automatically thinking, oh, you don't want police. You hate police. Police is gone. And some elements on the left do believe that, but in reality, defund the police has a great meaning, just poorly worded.
Yeah. So thank you for all of that. Now I'm going to get into the segment where we daisy chain the shows together. And yesterday on the show, I had a saxophone quartet called Group 2. Awesome. And they have a question, but the question wasn't intended for you. It was intended for the original person who was supposed to be on the show. But like I said, you saved my day today and came in for me because we are going to do this bitch every damn day. Period. Let's go. So Group 2, their question that we've rephrased and reinvented for you is, what's the coolest project you've done in 2020?
That's a great question. I am most proud of the multiple different things I've done to support the Black community within our country and our city specifically. So the two organizations that I proudly represent, they don't have anything to do with each other, are other than supporting Black individuals, is All of the Above Hip Hop Academy, or AOTA. And I am a board member with AOTA. And AOTA, if those of you don't know, we're a nonprofit educational cultural organization. We run courses for young men and women and people who don't give a fuck to learn about hip hop culture, hip hop dance, music production, lyric writing. We are really about propelling the culture of American hip hop forward, keeping it alive, but also teaching it to our young Americans, especially those Black and brown brothers and sisters. So with AOTA, obviously the pandemic's not been good with anybody, but I'm very proud to say that AOTA is very healthy. Our mission has never stopped, and nor will give up. We have a lot of friends around the city and around the country, around the state and country. We get donations from all over the country. So I'm very proud to be a part of AOTA, and that won't stop. They'll never stop. As you know, AOTA is a fixture in Lansing, Michigan. And I also brought up before my association with NAGA, National African American Gun Association. The most guns in U.S. history were sold during the pandemic. And the largest purchaser of those firearms as a group were Black Americans. Now, no matter how you feel about guns, you should know that Black Americans and people of color in this country have always been denied a basic constitutional right in this nation. In fact, the first gun laws existed here before we were a nation. They were basically stated, if you as a colonist are in the wilds of North America and you come upon a person of color with a weapon or with a gun, you are 100% with your right and legal obligation to kill that individual. So that's the basis of our nation, is that you see a person of color who is self-determined, right? This makes me self-determined. This gives me the ability to make a choice. And we've been denied that in this nation for so long. And NAGA being the largest collection of African-American gun owners, we seek to push forward those rights for our community. Because you might ask yourself, well, guns ravage the some African-American communities. I'll tell you what, most of those guns were not purchased legally. Those guns weren't purchased to protect households, to educate young children, young men and women about firearms, and they weren't used to protect themselves. NAGA only represents law-abiding, constitutional Americans, right? And so we want to give that power back. Again, you might think that gun rights and advocacy for African Americans is separate, but it's not. We all know what Brother X said. Malcolm X said, "By any means necessary." A lot of people don't know this, but Martin Luther King actually applied for a concealed carry because he knew his life was in danger and that the life of his children and his wife was in danger. So he wanted to have a gun. And the United States government denied him that right. So we seek to just give power back to the people. It's not a revolution. It's not terrorism. It's not violence. It's preparation, right? So the two, I would say, I am most proud of the work I've done within the community of color within the United States.
And you know, we could go on for a couple hours about this subject, but
sure.
You know, watch 13th, everyone. Watch what they've done with Jim Crow. Watch what they've done to oppress Black people from the very moment we first brought them to to this country.
Mm-hmm.
And also, don't forget there is a war on the poor. The war on drugs is not a war on drugs. It's a war on us.
100%.
And, you know, I don't want to be a violent person. I don't want to be involved with violence ever again in my life.
Sure.
But I sure as hell am calling you if these fucking Proud Boys show up.
Of course. Yeah.
And
you know, me and Nazis go way back, bro. You know.
Yeah. My grandpa was Antifa. He stormed the beaches of Normandy.
OG Antifa.
Has 2 Purple Hearts.
Wonderful.
Or had 2 Purple Hearts. All right, let's keep going. On the show tomorrow, I have our man Geronimo, who runs Footprints.
Fantastic name, by the way. Fantastic name.
Which one?
Geronimo. Geronimo. And Footprints.
Yeah. He helps people get footwear, especially, you know, people that are homeless or underserved or under the poverty line. What question would you like to pass on to Geronimo?
First of all, I want to thank Geronimo for his work, because the people in need are the people we need to help first and foremost. Children, the poor, the elderly, those unable to do for themselves. So the work Geronimo is doing is blessed, and God bless him. I'd like to know about Geronimo, what he thinks about how, if you look at kind of first world sneaker culture, we have sneakers that are thousands of dollars. We have sneakers produced by athletes, by the biggest musical stars, by the biggest movie stars. And we've created a culture in this country, and perhaps we didn't create it, perhaps Nike, created it and pushed it on us, where young men and women have lost their lives over a pair of nice sneakers, right? But what Geronimo's doing is providing a necessity, right? So it's the same culture, but very 2 different aspects of it. So I'd like to know his thoughts on what he thinks about the culture of high fashion and hyper valuing things that, a pair of sneakers that he puts on a homeless person, to that homeless person, it's like the young kid in high school getting a $300 pair of Jordans, same emotions, but one is giving someone the ability to have self-determination, like I'm getting at, and another one is an excess. So I'd really love to know his thoughts on how does he feel about that culture, and how does he think it fits into his work?
And I'm probably going to repeat this a little bit tomorrow, but I've got to give a shout out to the Horford family out of Grand Ledge. Al Horford, the NBA star, his little brothers, Josh and John, donated a whole, maybe 2 or 3 big trash bags of tennis shoes.
Wow.
And they got size 832 or whatever. But that Geronimo was like all over that, not because they were Jordans, but because he needs that size, and, I can't imagine, what it was like to give somebody probably a $500 pair of sneakers that were probably worn 2 or 3 times, at a basketball practice and didn't like or whatever. And I don't know, that makes it sound too much like the Horfords are not gluts. They are super supporters of the Fledge, of the communities, and all of that. They are great people. But, just your question is beautiful for that reason.
Thank you.
And I also want to point, I'll talk with Geronimo about that. Sorry, he got me all excited. But you and I are talking about politics, and we're talking about, economic development maybe and society in general. And what's your thoughts on the dichotomy between the American dream, which people really sometimes confuse with just being a capitalist pig and making as much money at the expense of everyone as possible, versus workers' rights, versus probably what the real American dream was about, was that capitalism, that ingenuity, that had a moral compass, that wasn't going to let their workers die.
So I'd like to reference what you brought up about Henry Ford. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Henry Ford because he didn't think that cars should have headlights or that they should offer more colors than just black. So he had some weird ideas, and I'm sure he wasn't super pro-worker either. However, you referenced that he pointed out that his business did better. He made more money. He produced more of what people needed when his own workers were taken care of. Right? So you and I, Jerry, we're classical liberals. We do believe in capitalism because nobody could tell us that there's another system that's fed more people, had greater scientific innovation, could put a man on the moon and a team of scientists 2 miles underwater, But at the same time, we're liberals. We care about people and workers. So we want to give them purpose and we want to give them success and enough to live their life, right? So it's so tough because we all care. I care. The Republican that lives down the street or a Trump supporter or the person who vehemently votes for Biden, they all care. They all want solutions to these problems. I think it's 100% cultural. The way we view these issues, the way we view ourselves, the way we view the workforce and the economy, all of this needs to change. Now, I'm not an anarchist. I'm not saying destroy all of it, start from scratch, because I don't know. Maybe that's what we need. Maybe it's not what we need. I do know that things need to change. And so comparing, what the global markets demand and what the American worker wants and what the dream is, I think the American dream is the human dream. And that's why America is so popular, is because we represent the best and the worst of humanity. And a shift needs to really take place. And that shift has to do a lot with democracy. We can't push just leftist ideology or just conservative ideology because humans have diverse opinions and we need to serve everyone. So understanding that relationship, having these conversations that you were having right now, and honestly, having political candidates that represent people rather than ideologies is the way forward.
Omar, thank you so much for coming on the show, especially, you and I have been talking about you being on the show for a while now, and it kind of fell into our laps, and you saved me, and I appreciate you, buddy. Man, this was a good one, and I love you a lot, and I think you know that. Oh, we didn't talk Wu-Tang, but we got to say Wu-Tang for sure because we ain't nothing to fuck with. So, yeah. Anything you want to take us out with, man?
I want to take us out with Jerry, whatever your middle name is, Norris, is one of the greatest Michiganders and one of the greatest human beings I've ever met, I've ever come to know. Consider a father figure, consider an uncle, consider a mentor, someone who has yelled at me and pissed me off and made me not talk to him for a couple weeks, but I always know he's there for me. Someone who is about his work, about his business, and about his community. Jerry Norris, there's nothing more important in this world to Jerry Norris other than his family, than his community and bringing people up. Jerry doesn't want to give you money. If Jerry had $1 billion, he wouldn't give you all $1 million. Jerry would give you $1 million if you had a good business plan. Jerry wants you to grow. Jerry wants you to work. So I'll tell you what, I want to end this on just letting the public know how much Jerry Norris does for the city, for entrepreneurs and creatives, and just people in general with his mentorship. And y'all better subscribe to the Fledge. Y'all better turn notifications on, and y'all better check out these videos on the regular. And then go visit Jerry. Make sure you got your mask on, you brought some hand sanitizer, and stop by the Fledge because that's where it's happening. The Fledge is going to be bigger than the White House one day. Guaranteed. Bet. Watch how much land the Fledge will own one day. Bigger than the White House.
I don't even know how to respond to that, man.
Good, Derek.
Thank you so much, man. You know everything I do is through other people, and that I deal in an economy of relationships.
Yes.
And I love you all. And yeah, yo. You're who I'm calling when I need it. You know that.
You know I'll be there, man. You know I got your back.
Thank you so much, Omar. I appreciate you a lot.
Namaste.